Okay, thank you again, Dr. Shanahan-Richards. So we're very fortunate today to have an incredible lineup of talented and passionate panelists with us. At this time, it's my pleasure to bring up our first panel, which will be a session entitled Destination Student Wellbeing, What is it and how do we get there? If you could please join me on stage now. Thank you all. So I'm going to go ahead and start off the session by letting them introduce themselves and let you know where they're from. Go ahead and start.
David Bowles, University of Florida.
Nance Lucas, George Mason University.
Hello everyone, my name is James Larcus from the University of Denver.
Good morning, Jenny Haubenreiser from Oregon State University.
And I'm Sue Wasiolek from Duke University.
And Jenny is also a past president of ACHA, so wanted to acknowledge that. So today we're going to look at discussing what student well-being is, why this concept is important, and how we can best further it as college health and wellness officials. The goal of this panel is to have the most robust discussion on this topic possible, so please do not feel limited to a question or answer format, and feel free to dive in wherever you would like to. So the first question is just to get us kicked off in a very general sense and talking about what exactly is student well-being to you. Just whoever's feeling brave.
I think David is. I think you're feeling this question.
You think I'm feeling this? On this particular topic, I wanted to learn from all of you, but I'll kick it off, so we'll go with that. So for me, it's about putting our students in a position to be able to live life completely, to be able to live life and everything that they have to go through without the experiencing the anxiety and some of the things that our students do today. We want them to be able to be productive, contributing members of society, and society for them at this point in their lives is on our campuses. And we really want them to be able, when we talk about all the dimensions of wellness, so often they are focused on one or two and they don't understand how important the others to bringing it all together. So that's a poor start, and hopefully y'all can do better.
No, I think that's a really great start. The only thing that I would add to that is that I don't think it's limited to our students. I think it's a community-wide effort, and it's something that we at least need to do our very best to talk about in a community and holistic way, and also to do our best to model the things that we want our students to do. And I will just say I am not a good model of many of the components of wellness and or well-being, and I think people notice that.
Yeah, what I would contribute to that, I've been in the field, I think I'm pushing 25 years, and it's been such an evolution from health and wellness to well-being and kind of cyclical, but it's so holistic and it's so non-denominational, I guess you can say, that it really, I've noticed it exists within systems, it exists within an ecosystem, within an environment, and it's not just how individuals feel. I mean, it's so essentially, control over your social determinants of health is one way of looking at it. But when you've seen this evolve from career paths to connecting to, have we created an environment that is conducive to well-being? So I really look at it from a systemic point of view. I also look at it increasingly as a social justice issue, that if we're not meeting these basic needs and points of connection and inclusion, so it goes well beyond kind of the classic health units.
The only thing I'll add is that I believe, too, in my experience with students, is that it's also not just an endpoint that we get to. It's a constant, ongoing process, and it's constantly evolving as we talk about the holistic nature and all these different dimensions. it's constantly going to be changing as students transition from the first year to second year, our grad professional students, to the real world, whatever that means. But it's constantly ongoing, and it's an active process, and we hopefully can create environments for them to orient their lives towards what well-being means to them at that point in time.
I echo everything that's been said. At George Mason University, we defined well-being for the institution because we have a 10-year strategic goal for Mason to evolve as a model well-being university, and it is going to take us 10 years, to get there. But we just defined it as building a life of vitality, purpose, resilience, and engagement. So we measure it around those constructs. But it's not just student well-being. Of course, that is our primary focus, but it's the entire institution. So all levels of employees and students. And so that's kind of the sort of larger kind of construct. We have taken a really sharp distinction between well-being and wellness. We see wellness as a kind of a subcomponent of a broader well-being concept at Mason.
Great, thank you all. So when I was in college 10 years ago, not really, it was longer than that, we didn't talk about this very much. We worked and went to school, and there wasn't a lot of discussion about this. And so where did this term kind of well-being come from related to college health, and where do you think it's going from where it's originated to where it is now, and then maybe the future of it?
I'm going to jump in on that. Interestingly, on the flight over, I found an article on the history of well-being. They actually dated back to Aristotle, of all things. My favorite definition actually came from William James, 1902, defined as healthy-mindedness, which I think is really interesting. And I started to adopt that term well-being because it was inclusive, particularly the mental health piece, that we're moving beyond movement and nutrition and sleep as these foundational physical pieces, but what about our emotional well-being and our social well-being, and just how we exist holistically in the world, in a community. It's so much a community focus. So I think the history is fascinating. When I started the field in the mid-1995, one of the first things I was warned is never, ever use the term holistic or wellness, because that was fluffy, unscientific, irrelevant work. And over the time, it started to increase, and there was a point in time where it says, well, we can use a whole student approach. That was acceptable. And then suddenly, holistic is back, like we've made this full circle, now with hopefully some metrics and some science to really back this up.
So go ahead, David.
Well, I'm going to connect to what she said. So I like when you talk about the mindedness, the mind, because most of my career has been in the physical realm. And now everything that I talk about when it comes to being active and exercise is focused on the impact that it has on the brain, that it has on the mind, whether it's from a learning perspective or from a mental health perspective. That's where we are. That's what it's really about as far as our students being successful and well on our campuses.
I was just going to say, while Jenny was reading Aristotle on the plane, I was doing a crossword puzzle. So I didn't learn all the history from way back when. But when you asked the question, what came to mind for me immediately was the Gallup poll that was done a number of years ago with employers, with large corporations, including higher ed institutions. And they were trying to really look at what they called the well-being of their staff, of their employees, and trying to figure out what in fact contributed to their productivity and also their happiness and satisfaction at work. And for whatever reason, the Gallup really did a great marketing blitz on that. I'm sure probably almost all of you have read at least parts of that particular survey. But it was after that that I really felt as though higher ed institutions began to embrace that term and look at wellness, which I agree is just a component of well-being, but began to look at wellness in that broader sense and looked at things like vitality and purpose and resilience and all the things that you mentioned. So in the modern day, for me, that's where the term really began to stick, at least for colleges and universities.
Yeah, and I think, just to build from that, I think the science around well-being has finally caught up to these century-old practices, right? And I think it's more important than ever today, especially at colleges, universities in this country, that we focus and make student well-being a priority, given the, historical high increase of documented student mental health challenges at our, as students are coming into our universities. And also, we have an attention crisis in this country. And so I think that these well-being practices really give tools to students to kind of be present, to respond to life's challenges and stressors and their coping mechanisms. Because, one of the things that the Gallup poll with students has found is that, and this is true at Mason, we've used the Gallup measurement activities, is that students, the vast majority of them, report that they don't have the ability to respond to day-to-day life stressors and problems. And that's where I think also these well-being evidence-based practices really can give greater efficacy to students.
Since we're talking about reading the magazines on flights, if you're flying American, there is in their magazine this month, there's a great article about playgrounds in some of the urban areas around our country. You read it. So it's really interesting. But as we talk about the students who are coming to our campus, and are they equipped? Are they ready for that environment? Are they resilient? And you read about these playgrounds and kids and how they're fashioned well, where it's not, in fact, one talk about, we don't mind them breaking their arm, we just don't want them breaking their neck. And it's okay to get dirty. And we've lost some of that as now we as parents think that, we've got to protect them all the time, and they don't learn the same way from that. So look forward to, as we talk about dealing with the group we talk about, it's the younger ones also. And we've got to be advocates for them to have those opportunities so they're in a better place when they show up on our campuses. Yep. I'm going to steal that magazine when I go home, by the way.
You're allowed
That's
to do
great.
that.
It's got a pretty good crossword puzzle in it, actually.
Sudoku. I'm all about the Sudoku.
I'm into the Sky Mall, that's what I'm looking for.
Well, I was studying how to get everybody out of the plane because I was in the exit row. So if you're on my plane, you'll be safe going home.
Yeah.
All right, so next, you guys have talked a little bit about why, and quite a bit actually, about why student well-being is so important. So how do you get that pursuit of well-being to align with the mission statements of your, the higher education in general, but specifically like on your campuses? How do you get that buy-in across the board?
Well, I'm going to, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, my background actually is not in health, it's actually in student affairs, and comes from a student development perspective. So when I think about how I was socialized and trained as a professional, is thinking about some of the foundational documents of our field and of our institutions is really to educate the whole student. And as we see this modern movement of wellness and well-being continuing to emerge from maybe purely the health standpoint to now thinking about mental health and these other aspects as well, I think it really dovetails really nicely, and well-being initiatives are uniquely positioned right now with higher education to be a part of and kind of infiltrated into everything that the institution does. If you look at how institutions started, they're really thinking about how do we develop whole citizens to then give back to their communities, which you've heard from some of the other panelists as the definitions of well-being. So I think that the fields are starting to merge together and understanding that there's some similarities and synergies between the two.
I was just going to say, and I think that's a great summary, that I suspect that many of the folks in the room are at institutions that are highly decentralized. Particularly if you're at a larger school, it may very well be that your student life folks are in one area reporting up to one senior officer, and your academic affairs and your faculty are reporting up to another. And I think that that's where there's our largest amount of work is needing to be done, or the greatest thought that we need to put into this is, how do we begin to bring this notion of well-being to the classroom? I think that's our greatest challenge. Our students don't spend as much time in the classroom, frankly, as they spend doing other things. But how do you engage the library in thinking about this? But clearly, how do you engage the faculty? Because even if the students aren't in the classroom all the time, they are being highly influenced by the faculty, by the work that they're being expected to do, the way that they're being asked to do their work. And this notion of, at least at our institution, I think there's a mindset of everyone there that if you're not busy, you're lazy. And so I think busy has really become a 4-letter word. I try not to use it anymore. I've talked to a number of you this morning, and I said, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. Well, it's just our normal response. It's just the way we react. We are busy. We're extremely busy. But I think that word, if we look at the brain and the impact that it has on the way that we think and we begin to approach life, it has an incredibly powerful and potentially negative impact on how we just think about the way that we approach all that we're doing. So I couldn't agree with more with everything that everyone has said, but I'm curious to sort of think about and talk about over the next day and a half ideas and thoughts that folks have had about this notion of well-being and how you have been able to get your faculty involved in talking about this and trying to incorporate it into their pedagogy as well as just their practices in the classroom and outside the classroom.
I also think, in addition to everything that's been said about aligning this with, institutions' mission statements, that this is also, I see this work really focused on providing opportunities for students while they're with us to explore greater meaning and purpose in their lives. And it has been striking to me in this journey that we have at Mason, the number of students who come in to the university with a predetermined path of their major and their careers. And I'm going to tell you a little story about, then it kind of goes back to what you were saying too around their kind of these, I refer to it as the Teflon generation.
Yeah.
We've wrapped them so safely. We have a donor who endowed scholarships for student well-being, and so our donor, who's 82 at the time was 82 years old, met with the student recipients at a lunch, and she's a wonderful person, and she was really excited to talk with the students. And the first thing she said was, as you introduce yourself, tell me what inspired you to pick your major, your academic major. And to a T, every single one of those students said something like this. Well, I come from 5 generations of engineers in my family, so my parents said I was going to be an engineer. One student spoke quite passionately about how ever since she was a little girl, she wanted to be a teacher. And when she went into high school, she solidified that she wanted to be a teacher, and she wanted to pick a university where she could major in education. And her parents were very much against this. And as she was getting accepted into universities, her mother sat her down with the monthly household bills and said, you will not be able to pay these kinds of bills on a teacher's salary. So she majored in health sciences to become a nurse. And to a T was, so I think this work also really includes opportunities for students to kind of align their values and their passions with their meaning and purpose, and then decide, what path they're going to take. So I would add that's I think what we try to do with universities in our mission statements is to provide these educational experiences for students so that they do have greater meaning and purpose in their lives.
Yeah, and I want to build on that, and thank you, Sue, for kind of bringing this, that our role as sort of the health people and the educators and the programmers into the broader ecosystem, I like that term, and kind of tying into the classroom experience, that we finally, in Oregon State, got the first inkling of the number one reason students leave early. Does anybody have any idea why they're leaving the university early? They don't feel like they belong. And these are these things where we can do something about that. So, and again, that comes into the classroom. What is the classroom experience around inclusion and social justice? We've had lots of public forums around this. Having the right bathroom is a factor of well-being. So it's really getting out of the box that we don't just have to provide the services and the programming, but we serve as catalysts and motivators to engage the entire campus community. The ownership of this is at the institutional level, and that there's so many different owners, and that everybody has an expertise that they contribute to this center point, which it is meaning and purpose. That when they leave, we're creating compassionate global citizens. That's our mission and our purpose.
So I love the busy is a new four-letter word. We all do, a lot of people wear the I'm so busy thing as a badge of honor. They think that we have great value if we're busy, and we really do need to get out of that. And our students, we already talked about role modeling for our students. Our students don't need to see that. I love the book Essentialism. I've read it 3 times, and I'm going to start practicing at some point. But it's tremendous. But as far as the academic side, I saw a webcast webinar recently, University of Vermont, and they talked about they're starting, they are infusing this into academics, and they're starting every class, I believe, with mindfulness, with meditation. And just think about the students. They come into class busy. They come into class with everything on their mind. They come into class looking at social media, and now they back it all down and they meditate. And how that prepares their mind to be able to learn on that particular day. It just settles everything, and I just think that does a lot. The other thing is it's incumbent upon all of us to build relationships on campus, to advocate on campus. That's, it's easy for me to say. I'm in year 30 on my campus. But whatever that means for whatever time period you're there, you need to go out, build those relationships, advocate for what we're doing as being critical to the mission of the university.
We should have started our session with 5 minutes of mindfulness next time.
Oh, that's right.
Next time. Good suggestion. So some of you talked about parents. So how do you engage parents in understanding well-being, and at what point do you have their involvement in this whole entire process?
Orientation, if not before. And I had the opportunity to speak at our family weekend breakfast last week. And so again, are you putting yourself in a position where you're being asked to come speak there? Or are you going and saying, I need to speak here because this is important for the parents to hear? And tell the parents also that they're role models. We're talking about us being role models. They need to role model as well. And a lot of times if you tell the parents how well-being can impact their lives now, first of all, they're going to listen. And secondly, whether their kids act like they're listening or not, their kids listen to the advice that parents get. My kids are older, and it's great. They'll actually have an intelligent conversation with you. But and at that age, it's, yeah, I know. But they're listening.
Let me add to that, just to verify exactly what you're saying. When I speak with parents, the National College Health Assessment has one of the items, where do you, number one source to get information, and then the believability of the information. And of course, the internet and peers are the number one places that they go, but believability is still their parents. Their parents do not realize the influence that they have. So as partners in communicating and helping those students engage, and helping them direct. And I heard the term just last week, we're no longer helicopter parenting, we are snowplow, lawnmower parenting, drone parenting. You know, it just continues to evolve, and it's like, it is what it is. The genie doesn't go back in the bottle, but let's utilize that, leverage that to get those students engaged. Because the students have such mad skills from a creativity and a kind of philanthropic approach. So let's just leverage that.
I think, yes, I agree, and I think we need to find creative ways to take that maybe one step further and make these resources around well-being accessible to parents and families of our students. And I know that's not an easy challenge, because I think we're barely scratching by to get resources for students. But I also think, and I feel very strongly about this around first-generation college students and their families, and how do we make these resources at least available for the families of our first-generation students. Because if really what all this is about, when we talk about well-being, it's really just about behavior change. When you boil it down, we're trying to change behaviors and rewire our brains for different responses and behaviors. And if we don't reach out to the parents, who, you know, are, you know, certainly a big influence in our students' lives with these resources in this kind of education, I worry a bit that we're not going to make the kind of impact I think we can make.
I would just add that we know that the parents, and many of you are parents in the room of college-age students, or have been, or will be. And the thing that I hear the most from parents today when they come to talk about their son or daughter possibly coming to our institution is the word "we." We are looking at a number of schools. We have traveled, I understand, together to look at these schools. We will begin to work on the application. We're not exactly sure how we're going to approach the essay questions, but then we will see where we get in. So that's sort of the mindset that many of the parents are approaching this process. And so getting back to the holistic community ecosystem model, I think that institutions of higher education need to really look right now at that admissions process and how we set ourselves up, frankly, for parental and student stress. We've created, I think Jenny and I were talking about this earlier today, I was talking with someone, we've created a monster. And I think we get that fervor and that anxiety just fed during that process. Students, as you know, are applying to a lot of different places, which is great. They have their stretch schools, they have their safety schools, they have all of those. But there's just this anxiety that is now connected with this admissions process that many of us never experienced. And I think it starts there. So somehow, if in fact, going back to the question about values, our institutions can actually list well-being, have that articulated as a value, and then practice it in all of the aspects of what we do with students and parents, I think that we've got to model it from the get-go. I know we all market ourselves. We're all fabulous schools in our marketing. We have no blemishes. We are the perfect place for everyone to come. And it's not a perfect place for everyone to come. And so I think we need to begin to really rethink how we wish to market ourselves and put ourselves out there, because I think, frankly, we create some very false expectations. I think that marketing strategy that we're using is just setting us up in many ways to, again, create a lot of unnecessary anxiety. And to acknowledge, you know, fitting in is an important part of all of this, and with that may come some speed bumps along the way, and that's normal and natural, and we're here to help, and there are resources to help feed students through that. But we are not going to college, and we are not doing the application, but we are.
Yeah.
understanding the we are and understanding that those natural bumps and valleys will kind of happen. I know some things that I've heard from other institutions that they're doing, not only from the admissions process, but all the way through the life cycle of the student's life, is with the rise in parent and family engagement offices, is actually having tailored newsletters and trying to, knowing that each student has an individual journey, but what are sort of the natural potential progression points of a student, and how do we tailor our messaging around that? So I know right now my institution, which is on a quarter system, it's midterm. So our parent family office is really making sure that we provide a lot of mental health resources, knowing that this is a huge spike for us around week 4 and 5. But then also thinking about the beginning of the year when they have all of their logistical, how do I get my health insurance, and what are those really sort of logistical, lower level in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those basic fundamental things, but really trying to think about the communication plan over what the natural flow of the student may be, all the way from admissions to ultimately when they're alumna and alumni of our institutions.
So you guys have mentioned a lot of things that we could look at improving. Are there any other improvements that the group should consider that we could work on to help take well-being to this next level?
I'll just say two things. One is I think we can improve upon how we measure well-being. And my colleague Helen Stubbs is here from the Gallup organization, and they're really taking a comprehensive approach to this, and we've used Gallup. But I think we have to think about different kinds of measurement activities. So external, like the Gallup organization provides colleges, universities; internal, and how can we use existing data that we have to see if we're moving the needle. It's hard. It's not easy to do. If I had to go back and do it over again, we've been in this work for 4 years now at Mason with our initiative. I wish we would have started only with measurement activities. So when we went out the gate full force with comprehensive measurement activities that Gallup provided and programming around well-being, and I wish we would have started just with measurement and gotten a great solid baseline data, which now we have. And so I think that's one thing. And that also, I think it has to be students and employees together. And we did not do that at Mason. We did just students, and HR did employees, and they used their own separate kind of measurement, which really was not in sync with how we were measuring our students' well-being. So we could have done that better. And then I think it's the other hard thing to do, but it's also an opportunity, is for us to take that measurement data and start to change policies using the data, and shift policies, or introduce new policies that uplift well-being of our students and our employees. So I think those are opportunities and challenges, but I think overall those are the kinds of things I think we can do better.
Somebody mentioned earlier about behavior change, and it might have been you, Nance, and that's one thing that I've talked about in health promotion is I didn't feel at one time like we were measuring the right things. We weren't measuring what was important. We weren't measuring, again, I like the measuring in advance to discover, where do we need to improve? What do we need to do? So then if you create programs and services to impact those behaviors, then you need to measure to ensure that you're having that impact. And if you're not, then you need to change your programs and services. If you are, or then maybe you still need to tweak them, but you need to know that. And it was also mentioned about resources and getting those resources. If we're not measuring, showing behavior change and showing how it impacts the mission of the university, then why is anybody going to give us resources to continue doing what we're doing? Mm-hmm. And then from a policy standpoint, the thing that, the one that really is irking me right now on my campus, and I'm fairly outspoken about it, which when you get late in your career, you can be a lot more outspoken. It's a lot of fun. So it really is. So, but the thing is, all the 24/7 stuff, 24/7 study centers, 24/7 libraries, 24/7 rec centers. So, and the only one of those on my campus that's not happened is the rec center one, because I've got a certain level of control there. But you know, our campuses, we're all about research. And you know, creating research and contributing to the knowledge that we have. Well, then sometimes we ignore research on our campus. And all the data shows that if two people have a test the next morning and one studies all night long and the other goes to bed at 8 o'clock, the one who goes to bed at 8 o'clock is going to have better grades. Not to mention the impact on anxiety and some mental health issues. So we've really got to advocate sometimes against what our students want, and against what our leaders want in order to make them happy. We've got to have better policy on campus.
I think partly we've become very consumer-driven. You know, what is it the consumer, and sometimes the consumer is the parent or the donor. So I think that's interesting. I concur with the measurement piece, and again, I'm going back in time when we had very few metrics. I think we're advantaged now. We don't have to sell this like we used to. We're actually given these formal charges. Well-being is central to student success. We know this now. From the physical, the social, the career. I mean, it's now on the map. One thing that but we don't have these tangible, measurable outcomes because they're not really built in. And it's hard because we don't live in a laboratory. Essentially, our work is a living laboratory, but we can't control, you know, you're going to be in the well area, you're going to be in the not well area, and we'll randomly select you into these spaces. One thing that we've done at Oregon State within the division is have, again, because this is owned by everyone, have the different departments they call them value propositions. This is borrowing from some of the business literature, but what specifically is your area contributing to student success and well-being, and how is that going to be acknowledged? How are you going to measure that? And finding these different ways of measuring. And I remember, because I was on the first National College Health Assessment, we didn't have anything. This is back in the late 90s. Now we have faculty staff measures because it really is a feature of the whole community, the community health piece. But we also need this multidisciplinary. It has to be cross-divisional. We can't just locate this in student affairs and say, you're in charge. This has to be a cross-divisional, multidisciplinary, strategic, aligned. And again, we get busy and we don't take the time to build the strategy in. We're just so busy doing the things that we're doing, it's hard to measure them.
So I would just like to echo Dave's comment about being on what sounded like the twilight of your career.
I hope.
And being in that same position, it is enormously refreshing. So good luck to all of you getting there at some point. If there were one thing that I could do before I leave this profession, it would be to be part of developing the metrics for figuring out how we know we have moved the needle and we have improved things. I would love to be part of a conversation. I hope that that involves all of you in this room to really figure out what that might look like. We have enormous data at my institution. My colleague Tom Zigathy is in the back. You'll be hearing from him later on in a panel. But we have so much data, we don't know what to do with it. But the data really tells us pretty much that students know a lot, that when they go to one of our programs, their knowledge and awareness of the topic has increased. At least they tell us it has when we do pre and post tests. And they also tell us that they have a heightened intentionality to change their behavior. But the question is, did they change their behavior, and how do we figure that out? So for example, if we have some type of program related to mental health, and suddenly the numbers of students that goes down who are attending the counseling center, or the numbers go up, what does that say? Is that good or bad? We've done two, and this is not off the topic, but it's a little separate and apart from the work that I do, but we've done 2 campus culture surveys on sexual misconduct. Our numbers from survey 1 to survey 2 have jumped incredibly in the area of knowledge. Students across the campus, undergraduate, graduate, and professional students, report this enormous increase in their understanding of the concept of consent. They report that. And yet at the same time, the number of cases that are being reported is going up. Well, one could argue that's bad. One could argue that that's awesome. Well, which one are we going to argue? And how are we, basically, as a profession, going to justify whichever one we're going to argue? Our numbers on our campus of students who are being transported for alcohol-related incidents, at least last year, the last couple years, has continued to go up a bit. And yet, what we found is that their blood alcohol level, when they are reporting it, has gone down. So our interpretation of that is they're calling earlier, and that's a good thing. But again, all of those measures take great thought. We know that data can be interpreted in, frankly, almost any way we want to interpret it. But I think we would be well served to think about this, to plan for it, and as a profession and a community of folks who are really, really committed to well-being, to figure out how are we going to know over the next a number of years that we have truly made a difference.
The only thing I'll add, and I agree with everything in terms of the ability to measure and show some of these things and have policies, I'm going to kind of take it down even another level and just say, based off what has been said earlier, peers. We have a lot of great people in this room who do this work and hopefully can show the impact when we get those measures and those policies right. But when we talk about where students are going, a lot of times it's not us at the beginning. And so there's some really powerful things I think we can do to train and see peer education groups that are continuing to rise on our college campuses, but giving them even maybe another level of skill set that they can actually then become sort of those role models either for their peers around well-being, but then also being a support system, because ultimately they're going to go to them before they come to us. And so I think another thing that I'd like to see is not only our policies and our measurements that we can continue to advocate for the good work that we're doing, but really utilizing our really creative, awesome students that was referred to earlier.
And James is an expert in that area and a tremendous resource in that, so.
Thank you.
And Stephanie, I just want to, one other word. I think this is such a critical piece, the measuring and the why we're doing this, because it's the same thing. Our sexual violence rates are going up. That's a good thing in terms of reporting, but the board of directors don't necessarily know that. When it comes down to it, so I'll kind of below what you went down, and then I'm going up. The numbers that matter at the institution, at our institution, are persistence, completion, and advancement. So this is where we've used that as a frame. Are students persisting in their academic career? Are they advancing into graduate school, into a career? Are they completing a degree? And those are the numbers, not that that's our end, but that's the number that matters to the senior administration and the board. So it's somehow taking all of these metrics and framing those in a way that shows that advancement and the completion.
Very important. And I wish you guys would have given me the memo that I was supposed to wait till closer to retirement to be really vocal. Because I get myself in trouble.
I wish I'd gotten there sooner, trust me.
Yeah, I haven't really changed that much from.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. So you talked a lot about how hard it is to measure, but from maybe if you don't have the exact measurements, can you talk about any positives that we're seeing since well-being's been more at the forefront of discussions and kind of services and programs that are being put in place?
I'll just start by saying I think this notion of well-being is frankly on the tip of everyone's tongue. I think it's a household word. I do think that it's something that people talk about a lot. I believe that our students are engaging in many more activities and programs in this area than they ever have before, and I do think that they are embracing it. Again, I don't know that all the measurement is out there to prove that, but my observations, my gut, and everything else tells me that it is mattering, it is making at least somewhat of a difference. I do think that anything that we can do to get our entire campus engaged, we are very fortunate at Duke to have a chancellor of a health system, which is separate and apart from our university, committed to looking at a healthy campus initiative. In fact, not just looking at one, but implementing it a couple years ago. And so this is something that is really, I think, gained some tremendous traction. And again, to be able to get the entire community involved, I think is a real game changer.
Yep. I'm going to second that, because this well-being, and I remember, I think it was the interview when I was interviewing, and I realized I had switched out wellness for well-being because it's inclusive. And we don't have to sell this. This is now a charge. This is now on the map. This is now parents want to know, students want to know, and it's inclusive. This engages the entire community, whether it's our career services director, our international programs. There's a place at the table for, partners that we never even knew that we had. So it's really, I love that idea of inclusivity. And what we're seeing, and I would just, if the camera could go look out, this is the success of well-being as a concept, because we're all here. We all have a stake in the game. We don't quite have those concrete measures, but we know intuitively that the state of well-being is, and even in our own success, and how we can build this back into our own resiliency and ability to persist, just as we're trying to teach this with students.
I'll just give two concrete positives that we found at Mason. One is we have the Strengths Finder assessment, which is a Gallup product, available for free for all of our students. And we pay for it, but it's free to them, and it's free to our employees too. And so Gallup did some measurement and activities around strengths and some deeper dive analysis, and found that students who knew their strengths, took the assessment. It was a driver of their overall well-being, but specifically their engagement, energetically pursuing their goals. They're more hopeful. They also believe that Mason is positively contributing to their well-being. So something that this tool that gives them, I think, greater agency and efficacy worked. So it was a really positive on return on investment. Second, we've seen, because we do pre-post, we have our own pre-post well-being competency that we developed at my center for academic courses and semester-long, year-long experiences around well-being. And when we integrate well-being in academic courses, residential programs that have a focus on well-being that are year-long, we see tremendous learning gains around various dimensions of well-being measured by these skills, like meaning and purpose, resilience, social connections, grit, and so a message there, and what we've been working on at Mason is then how do we create more experiences that are comprehensive, whether inside the classroom or outside the classroom, where students can really, over time, develop these competencies and skills related to well-being.
So a few of you have mentioned, who else besides those of us in the room are responsible for well-being. So can you list other community partners that we haven't talked about, people out in the community very much, as well as other maybe campus partners that maybe some people here haven't thought about engaging on this initiative with?
What I think we've missed in higher education is the partnership with the K through 12. I mean, lots of conversation about the upstream, but when when you talk about consent and what a healthy relationship looks like, it doesn't just start in a college environment. And I think there's always that legal concern, can we go talk about these things with minors? And maybe not, we're not sure what kind of permission slips you need. But that, it is a community. And I think that even the concept of well-being, it doesn't exist in student affairs. It doesn't even exist on campus. This is that broader law enforcement, the relationship with law enforcement. We've had them come to campus. They want to do workshops with residential students just to develop that community policing, that we're actually here as partners. If you have a party that's out of control, call us and we will help you. We're not here to harm, we're here to help. So I think that is, and we've done that a lot in kind of the health promotion field, bringing these community partners, but I don't know how we can reach the K through 12 and actually start engaging even the middle school, high school, Because they look to our students, and that goes back to your peers, educators can be tremendously influential for those younger people because they're socializing into that new identity as a college student. And what an opportunity to bring that good messaging.
I know that we've got some of our fraternity men that are mentoring for middle schoolers that don't have the strong people at home to help them. And I think that's an opportunity. Now, the fraternity men are not mentoring at the high school level because that might not lead to the best outcomes in the world potentially. So, but imagine if the peers, the peer educators, if we can get them to get out there and be part of these mentoring programs, and K through 12, and it can make a difference. The other thing is we've got to advocate for our politicians to make the right decisions. We're at a place in Florida where we've got 2 options for governor, and I don't like either one of them, but I'm going to have to make a decision. But from an educational standpoint, it's very obvious which one's got the best policies. And too often, some of the policies impacting education that are being considered and pushed are those that are really going to separate the students who are advantaged from the students that are disadvantaged. And public education is going to be just for those who are disadvantaged. And they're not going to be as many resources for them. And that is not effective. To hear, my wife's a kindergarten teacher, and she's got disadvantaged kids in her class and very advantaged kids in her class. And where they start is so dramatically different. And nothing's going to change between then and them getting to us if something isn't done to try to impact this and well-being being a key to that.
I'm going to pause for just a second to see if there's any questions that have come in online that I can ask. So I'm going to repeat that into the mic for the viewers at home. So is there a difference between wellness and well-being? Just remember, you only have 15 minutes left. Actually, about 5.
15 versus 5.
Yes.
I think we've
Yes.
talked about that a little bit. I think you were, a lot of it just goes back to kind of semantics, and the wellness was always associated with fitness, nutrition, sleep came in. It's like, oh, those are the holy 3, but that's not all. It's not just a physical wellness, and I still use them interchangeably because I think of mental wellness, physical wellness, social wellness. Well-being, I think, it's kind of separated that health piece into that broader holistic, that we have some control over our social determinants. We have a balance, we have equilibrium in our life. So it's a much more inclusive, or it's nebulous in the sense that it can mean things differently to different people, but it's not constrained by the tradition.
I think there is a difference between the two. We talked about it earlier, and I think we have to decide as institutions, as we're placing some emphasis on these concepts, that we pick one, define it, and be clear about it, because it will then make the measurement piece a lot easier when you do it that way too. And again, I think we see wellness as a subset of kind of a broader definition of well-being, which has so many different domains to it. It's, it's the physical, social, psychological, emotional, spiritual, purpose, and so forth. And so I see well-being as a much broader concept. And also the science and research is, we can make distinctions between the research and science around wellness and the research and science around well-being. And so that's another way to kind of cut it in terms of the distinctiveness of them.
I I think we have time if there's one more question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So this is very pointed about how are you using StrengthsFinder related to your student success?
Well, I was glad to hear that you can do the Gallup StrengthsFinder for free. I'm sure the Gallup people enjoyed it. Oh, just at Mason, I'm sorry. Just
Oh,
at
no,
Mason.
we're paying for it.
Yeah, I know you are, I know. So, there was that moment out there, like, oh, don't tell people that. So, so we use it primarily, so I'm gonna refer to recreational sports. We have 750 student employees, so we use it with them. Now, we don't do it for all 750. We do it for the leaders of those students all the way up through our staff. And for one, I think, and it's what you referred to. I remember the first time I saw my top 5, I was like, there is no way. That is wrong. And then I read the paragraph about each one. I was like, oh my, who got into my head? Oh my gosh, this is incredible. And now I refuse to take it again because I don't want any of it to change. But it just says so much about who you are, why you're like that, and then it allows you to appreciate who you are and why you operate the way you do, and how you can use that part of you for success. And think of our students that come in not knowing who they are, not having the confidence to think that they're strong. And, maybe they're great in math, but they've got zero confidence in anything else about themselves. And then they read that, and they connect to it, and they connect that to the success that they've had, and then they can see that as leading to success in the future, and that's very empowering.
Yeah. I would say I'll give you 2 specific ways we use strengths at Mason. There are many. But I'll say, within the first 4 years of our initiative, we had nearly 18,000 students and employees complete the StrengthsFinder assessment. So
Awesome.
It's, as we're evolving as a well-being university, we're also, I think, evolving too as a strengths-based organization. So in terms of academic student success broadly, our career advisors and academic advisors, many of them have gone through some kind of strengths preparation, and they're now using the tool with students. So, they're asking students to come with their strengths profile to their sessions, and getting students in part to think about how they can use their strengths to make well-informed decisions, just, overall. So that's one way. And also, it's now embedded in all of our University 100 sections. So about 2/3 of our incoming students, transfer and first-time students, take that course. And so they're getting exposed to it that way. And so I think that's helped us. We don't require many things of our students at Mason. I don't know why, but we just don't. And there's some good things about that and some not so good things about that. But we are moving to requiring, so starting in summer of 2019 at orientation, students to complete the StrengthsFinder assessment at orientation before they come in the fall. So that, I think, will be another future way in which we impact student success.
Great. Well, I just want to thank this wonderful panel for giving us such insight to start us off on well-being. I'd like to also thank everybody that's here in person again, everybody that's viewing online. We are going to go ahead and take a short break and reconvene at 10 a.m. for the next panel, Innovative Approaches to Well-Being Program Design. So for those of you that are watching, you can leave your live stream on, and we'll be back at 10 o'clock, or you can log out and log back in. And thank you all again, and I hope you all continue the conversation throughout the day. Thank you.
I asked that.